Let me just walk through what we had done the last time, right? Uh, we basically went through a bunch of, uh, you know, options and configurations that we have within the SAP GenAI Hub. Now, some of the basic options that we saw were, how we can do some model selection, how we can basically uh, choose some parameters like temperature and these things. Okay. So how we can choose some things like, the temperature, the maximum max tokens and things like that. So I'll just start with this once again, just for context. So these were some things like, what are max tokens, what is the temperature, what is streaming response. Within chat context, we had, the option to select something like context history, different types of prompts we saw. Why do we need a system prompt? What is the importance of having a system prompt and things like that. Where we stopped the last time was uh, over here. We actually went through a bit of this pre-trained transformer model also. I won't go here because this is almost not relevant for anyone in general. This is something that SAP has, so that's why they have just added it over here. But what we had to go through was, orchestration as a as a service within these kinds of platforms. Now, considering we all work in IT industry and we all work on building some or the other product or a service or a platform or anything. And almost everything involves building a pipeline. It could be any pipeline, right? So if you are a data engineer, then you might want to build like an ETL pipeline where you get some data from a certain source, whether it is streaming data or whether it is static data or whether it is unstructured data, whatever it is. You follow some kind of a architectural pattern, you follow some kind of a database pattern, whatever it is. But for that, you build a pipeline. You say, okay, I have my PDF stored on S3 or I have my PDF stored on SharePoint or somewhere, whatever it is. I will fetch my PDFs from there. I will extract some information out of those PDFs. I will convert that into some table or a CSV or a database, PostgreSQL database or whatever. And then on top of this, I will build a dashboard where users can see the data, right? So this is like a proper data engineering pipeline where you have data in a certain format, you follow some kind of a, let's say, medallion architecture or something, bring the data from bronze, silver, gold, whatever it is, right? So these are all some technical terms that we usually use, but all of this involves building some or the other kind of pipeline. Now, until now, we have seen building like a chatbot which could answer your questions in the chat format, the way we have seen, let's say, ChatGPT or Claude's chatbot or Claude Code also, for that matter, right? That is also a chat-based coding editor. So all of them are chat-based, but not everything that we build usually are chat-based, right? We are not building chatbots on a chatbots on a day-to-day basis. We might need to build a ETL pipeline, let's say, or I might want to build, let's say, a data extraction pipeline. But does that mean that we can't use generative AI over there? No. Generative AI as a technology or as a capability can be brought in almost everywhere, wherever you need some kind of an intelligence, right? And that is something that we will touch upon today. Uh, if you see, when we had gone to this orchestration, I had, highlighted some of these points over here, right? Why do we need to orchestrate pipelines in general, right? We need to orchestrate pipelines because we want our data or we want our, there is some journey that the data needs to take and that needs to be orchestrated. If we don't orchestrate it, then there is no way that the data will follow that particular path and then we will get like an enriched format of the output or whatever, right? Some of the key functions according to this, and in general also, this is, general industry best practices where you would want to have some kind of a templating, right? You would want your data, let's say you have 10,000, 100,000 PDFs in a certain source location. You would want that when you extract that PDF, you want it in a certain format, right? Or whenever you are extracting some information, you want your LLM to not answer haphazardly or hallucinate. Rather, you want it to answer based on some source document that you have, right? You might want some, translation service in between. Let's say your PDF has Chinese text in it, right? You might want to extract it in English because your dashboard supports only English data. So you might want something like a translation. You might need content filtering. What that means is like if the PDF has some information which shouldn't go through the pipeline, then you might want to filter it. So these are all the things which usually form part of a pipeline. Now, this is like a very, very, narrow, set of functions that this particular SAP GenAI Hub provides. This can go very, very vast, right? And there are many, many orchestration or automation tools which are usually available, which do this job. So I'm not sure if you guys have heard about NA10, but NA10s are one such AI workflow automation platforms, right? If you see over here, you will see that it has, a bunch of these things, nodes, which you can basically connect to each other and orchestrate whatever you want to orchestrate. Within that, if you see IT ops, security ops, DevOps, sales, you name it, and they have a pipeline for it. And if you see over here, they have like a bunch of pre-built pipelines also, right? So these are some, basically some automation or orchestration uh, uh, platforms which are there. A very naive, uh, platform that SAP currently has within its generative AI. This thing is this, where it has these functionalities, very, very basic functionalities. When you say you are basically building an orchestration workflow, you are essentially taking some request. This request could be anything, a user asking a question, or a PDF coming as an input, or an email coming as an input, whatever that request could be. But there is something coming as an input. You do a bunch of things on top of it and you give a response. That is essentially what we are doing whenever we are building any kind of an orchestration pipeline. Within that, we we have some things which are relevant for from a point of view of generative AI pipelines or applications. One of them is grounding. What grounding essentially means is that whenever you are asking or whenever you are answering a question using an LLM, right? You want to make sure that the LLM always responds from whatever information you want it to answer. For example, if I go to just ChatGPT in general and ask it who is Tom Cruise, there must be some or the other data present in the world which was used to train this model, and the model knows who Tom Cruise is. But let's say I have published a article just today, right? I wrote an article about, Cockroach Janta Party and what it does, right? And I just uploaded it today on the internet. Of course, this information was not used for training the model, right? The model doesn't have this context, or the model was not trained with this information. Uh, in that case, we would want the answer to be coming from a certain source, which is this article which I just uploaded, right? In that case, we will need to attach that article into our, LLM's context. I had shown like a very basic example the last time. Let me again go back to that. This was basically If you see the pop-up literally said you can get personalized responses. The way to do is by grounding it on something. So if I ask something like what in the CJT today? Okay. So if you see, the first thing that it did was searching the web, which is some tool that ChatGPT internally has. I don't know if I can disable that tool or not, right? But just imagine that if it didn't have that capability, ChatGPT didn't have that capability to search the web, right? In that case, it wouldn't know what to answer for this particular question. I'm sure there must be some or the other setting where I could go and, you know, disable web search, if that is even possible. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, the point is that if I do that, if I disable that, then it won't be able to search and it will never be able to answer this because it doesn't have this information. The way it grounded itself to my question was by first searching the internet. Imagine Google search. Google search gave some top 10, top 20 results. It took those results, added it into its context, and then answered the question, right? So that is essentially what grounding means in the context of generative AI or LLMs. Templating is basically uh, making sure that your inputs have some format and your outputs also have some format. For example, whenever you are giving an input to the LLM, in ChatGPT, I just write a question, right? But in the backend, it has a system prompt. Then it has a placeholder for a user prompt also, which is essentially what you see this format to be. Whatever input that I'm giving, it has a way, it has a placeholder for that, and whatever input I'll give will go and sit inside this placeholder. I will show that in the demo also in some time, but templating is essentially making sure that you have a certain template in your prompt so that there are some placeholders and whatever input that you give, whatever response that you get from grounding, let's say web search. So the web search information goes into a certain part or a certain placeholder in your prompt so that the answers are generated using that information, right? That is what is templating. Data masking is very self-explanatory, right? Like if you want to mask some data before it goes to the LLM, you need to add data masking. We will add this and see in the demo. Input filtering, a very important feature usually in chatbots and other applications where you want to make sure that when a user is asking something like tell me how to make a bomb or something like that in a enterprise chatbot that you have built, it shouldn't answer those things, right? So there are many different ways on how you can do. Azure has one AI content filter mechanism, which is what they have integrated into this hub. But then every other platform provider has this feature, right, where you can filter out inputs based on certain parameters like hate, violence, sexual, self-harm, whatever, right? There are more features to it. We can implement almost 80 to 100 different ways of identifying and doing input filtering. Model configuration, we already saw the last time. There are different configurations that you can set in a model, which essentially make sure that the model performs in a way that you want it to perform. Output filtering is exactly same as input filtering. Input filtering, you filter the user's input so that if a user is asking something malicious, that gets flagged. In output filtering, you are essentially filtering the LLM's response. So if the LLM is generating something malicious, then you want to make sure that the user doesn't see that either, right? So it's highly possible that sometime you are asking the right question, but the LLM understood it incorrectly and it's generated something malicious. So in enterprise applications, you tend to do both these things in both input filtering and output filtering. And then there is something called as harmonized API, which I have no idea about. Let us read. Harmonized API lets you use different foundation models without the need to change the client code. Okay. Um, so harmonized API, what they mean to say over here is there are different model providers, as we have already seen, right? Like OpenAI has its own set of models. Claude has its own set of, Anthropic has its own set of models. Gemini has its own set of models. For accessing all of these models, you need to make an API call, right? Like when I do ChatGPT over here, when I'm doing ChatGPT over here, I can clearly see that some API call is happening. What happened? Yes. Yeah. So if I go here, some API call is happening over here. Okay. Okay, my system is kind of hungry. Hmm. Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yep.
you are.
Okay, cool. So we all understand that API calls happen whenever we are, making these calls, right? So if you see over here, I don't know why, but it is just hung for some reason whenever I'm opening this tab. But it makes these calls whenever I'm doing, let's say, hi, enter. So what it did is it called the conversation API with a certain payload. If you see over here, right? With a certain payload. If you see the header, you will see that chatgp.com backend API conversation API got called over here. It got a 200 response. This is the payload. In this payload, if you see the message that I had put in, you will find that message somewhere over here. Uh, I'm not able to find it. But if you see the response, there is a preview, there is a response. This is a streaming response. It basically streamed the response that what would you like to talk about and need help with. If you see, what would you like to talk about and need help with? This is exactly the streaming response, and then it says done, which is done. Now, ChatGPT has a certain payload that we need to send for making sure that the API call responds with a 200 response. If you send anything other than this payload, it will not work. In a similar way, Claude has a different payload, right? Why would Claude make a payload that is exactly same as ChatGPT? No, they wouldn't make it. So Claude has a different way of writing their input and output request format. Similarly, Gemini has different. Harmonized API is basically one place where you don't need to manage all of these different codes for calling different APIs. They will make sure that whatever model you select, they will make sure that they have written a wrapper around everything so that you just select the model and to make sure that the request goes in the right format to the right API. So this is what harmonized API means. There are many open source applications also which are usually used to do this. Something called as light LLMs, or there are other Python packages also which are especially known for doing this only. And many people actually follow OpenAI format because OpenAI was one of the first companies to basically provide APIs as a service for LLMs, right? So OpenAI format is very popular. So this harmonized API, what it will do is it will convert everything into an OpenAI format and make sure that the wrapper is written like that. So we have to make sure that we just know the OpenAI format. They will make sure that whatever request we send to it, it will convert it into the Claude format and send it to the Claude API. That is essentially what this is doing. So yeah, these are some things. What I'll do is I'll just switch to the this thing. So yeah, to basically start this module, we again need to go to the same AI Launchpad, whatever we were doing the last time. Uh, Before I start, I'll just take a pause and understand, or if anyone has any questions or any doubts of whatever we just discussed.
No, sure, nothing from mine.
Cool. So yeah, so we just need to do this go to orchestration. There are a bunch of orchestration pipelines that many people have just created on this platform. I think if I also create something, then it will be listed somewhere over here. uh, yeah, let me see that. I'll just create one. Hmm. So as you can see over here, these are two configurations that are currently available when you are building an orchestration: a prompt template and a model configuration. Let's just start with this. A prompt template is basically you creating a template. So I told you the last time that we can have a system prompt where we tell the system what it does. So what I did was, before this session, I just created like two, three resumes. So we'll try to see if we can build some kind of a resume parser assuming you are like building something for the HR department in your company, you're building some pipeline for them. So we can build like a very good resume parser for them if you get thousands of resumes every month or every year, right? Because many people apply for jobs. So you would want to have systems in place which make sure that only relevant resumes reach the relevant stages or relevant parts of the departments or whatever it is, right? So let's just say that you are an expert resume parser or something like that. We will add a user message also over here. I'll come to why that is later. So we decided that this will be a system prompt. This will be the user prompt. Now, this is the resume of the candidate. And I told you about templating earlier, right? So this is what it looks like. Mm. If I do this, or okay, I'll just remove this and I will add an input variable, right? This is exactly the format that I was trying to add. I'll just put a space over here. Instead of input variable, I will just say candidate resume. So what it did was it basically created a candidate resume as a variable name over here. I can put something over here, right? So this is some default value, right? As you can see, as I'm making these changes, a system is getting created over here, like an orchestration pipeline is getting created over here, which you can run basically, right? And then there are model configurations. You could select a model. We already saw that there is a model library, model hub, which is available. We'll continue with the default. For this model, the max tokens possible is 64,000. For any different model, it could be different also, right? For some, okay, actually, we can actually see that. I don't know, perplexity sonar. If you see, this only has 32,768, a very different, strange number, but yeah. And if you see the temperature now, you can set till 1.9, whereas in Haiku, we had seen that the option was only till 0 to 1, right? So these are some different things that you can configure based on different models. Every model provider provides different kinds of options. For some other model provider, you could also have a third option. I don't know, but yeah. And we could go over here. This is a default value, but we could remove this, and I'll just see. I just created some sample resumes. I'll copy this and I'll go back here, paste this, and I'll run this. Mm, yeah. So if you see, we just gave it a system prompter of you are an expert resume parser, and we just gave it a resume. So it gave some response. You can see that this is some good looking response, but what do we do with this response? This has no structure. We can't use it in our pipeline. How will we use this information in the next step? So a good prompt for building these kinds of pipelines is to make sure that you give it some structure. For example, let's say after this, I write the response should be in a format, right? A JSON format. I'm assuming everyone knows what the JSON format is, so I'll just do I need to save this? Actually, I could save this as a orchestration. So yeah, orchestration. Yeah. So okay, If I do this, it has the JSON format prompt over here, and I can run this. Now we'll see that it will probably extract something in some JSON format, right? So it did extract something in a JSON format, which is more usable in a pipeline, right? Once you extract something, so you have 10,000 resumes, you will get 10,000 resumes output in a certain format. But let me rerun this, right? Let me probably remove this last line because not every resume will be the same and rerun this. Let us see whether it generates the same format again or not. It did probably, I don't know, but what I'll do is let's keep this format in mind, right? Some candidate name, contact information, something it generated. Now let me take someone else's resume and see whether it is able to generate the same format again or not. It did. I don't know. I actually don't remember what was the last format, but yeah, it does have uh, some similarity. But the point that I wanted to make was when you do this exercise on, let's say, 10,000 different documents, right? You are bound to find different formats coming up. I'm sure this was not the format the last time. At the end, I think it was looking different the last time, right? So when you do the same exercise on, let's say, 1,000 resumes, 10,000 resumes, you are bound to get different formats, which again makes our pipeline not usable because if the next step, which could be some post-processing step, if that doesn't get the output in a exact same format every time, then it will not work, right? So that's the reason what I did was I created a prompt which does that for us. If you see, I created a prompt where it clearly tells what it has to do, right? How it has to format the output and how it should come. So I will just take this and I'll put it over here. So this becomes our prompt where we are clearly telling it what is the format that it should generate the output in, right? And you are resume parsing engine. I'll take this, I'll put it in the system prompt. And if you remember, we had created an input variable, which is user underscore resume. So I will take this and I'll put it over here. Oh, it is already user underscore. Fine. So this essentially makes it this. Right. Now, if I give a user resume over here, it will make sure that it always generates the output in that format, hopefully. So we can go back to our this thing. So if you see the schema, it says personal and full name, whatever. So if you see, it has exactly generated that in that form. Now, if we do this on, let's say, 1,000 documents, right? Then it will always generate the output in this particular format only. And this will make sure that whatever downstream tasks that we have, let's say you want to store all of this information in a PostgreSQL database, or if you want to put this in some kind of some NoSQL database, but for some reason you still need some kind of a schema in a NoSQL database, right? You can do that, and you can be very sure that okay, I will always be able to parse it and show it in some Power BI dashboard or a Tableau dashboard or whatnot, right? And apply filters and whatnot. So this is essentially how we create a general pipeline. But this pipeline has nothing. It only has a prompt template and a model configuration. Why would I want to have only these when I already saw that there are a bunch of things that this provides? It provides a bunch of things. All of those things can be come have been added in this advanced this thing over here. One is grounding management, another is input translation. We need input translation or not? I don't know. One might need it. One might need something like a data masking, input filtering, output filtering, and then output translation. As you can see, almost everything is self-explanatory, but having this in a scalable pipeline and building this in a very structured way by making sure that the output of one level goes as an input to the other level is what makes the primary difference. And for almost very long, LLMs were used only for these kinds of application until Anthropic came and they launched Claude Code as a product, which completely changed the way people started thinking about LLMs. Now people know that agents can be created, coding agents do a lot of work by themselves and things like that. But before that, LLMs in enterprises primarily were used only for creating these orchestration and automation pipelines and making sure that the retrieval quality, data extraction quality is way better than how it used to compared to how it used to be earlier, right? So that was essentially what was a very relevant use case for LLMs. But then suddenly coding agents came into the picture and coding became the market where for which all these LLMs were developed. So yeah, that is how the landscape has changed. But this is still a very relevant use case. We I mean, I have never spent a time in my last 4 to 5 years where I was not building a pipeline for document extraction. Whatever kinds of projects I have done, there was always one project which I did which dealt with document extraction. This is called as document AI in this circle, AI circles. There are companies built just for doing this, just to show you like Landing AI is one company which does document processing. They call it intelligent document processing, right? So this is like a very relevant use case in this industry that you know that is raising billions of dollars or millions of dollars in the market. So yeah, coming back to this, we have activated all of these things. The job is the same. If you see over here, when I added grounding management, it immediately added a grounding variable for me, right? What this essentially means is that there is okay, within grounding also, we can enable or add some repositories on top of which it could be grounded. Just to give you an analogy, when I went to ChatGPT and I, let's say, add over here, what this, okay, leave it. When I go to ChatGPT and I add web search over there as a tool, right? It knows that it has to ground its answers on web search, right? That is essentially what we are doing over here. We have added a repository. This is some default repository that is available from SAP helping portal or whatever. But there could be other repositories also. So if you see, there are a bunch of these repositories. I was actually checking through this and I saw that there are some repositories available for free. Like you could check this repository. This repository has some product information in a docx format. You know, there are some repositories. I won't go and create one because for creating one, I need to give them uh, some some of the thing. Yeah, so I need to give them either SharePoint, S3, SFTP, Workzone, or SDM. I have neither of them right now. That's why I won't create one. But we understand what this is, right? If you see, there is a repository. In this repository, people have just uploaded a bunch of data. As you can see in this repository, I don't know, some people have uploaded some termination letter, exit log, phone records, criminal records, product data, whatever it is, right? So there is some random things that people have added. We could use it. So let us actually uh, copy this collection and see if I can add it over here. So if I go here and I search for this collection, do I get that collection? I do. I'll add this. Select. Over here, you have a max document and max chunk option. What max document or max chunks mean is, as you saw when I opened that repository, there were many documents that were indexed over there, right? So when I'm actually enabling this repository, I'll delete this one, I'll enable this one. When I'm enabling this repository and I'm searching through this repository while answering the question, how many documents do I want to search on top of? So I could search only on one document, which let me rephrase my point. I could search, but I would take the responses of the top one document that came in my search result. For example, when you go on Google search and you ask for something, the first link that comes is the top result, right? In a similar way, when I'm adding something as grounding in my pipeline, what I'm enabling my pipeline to do is I'm enabling it to search through the repository that I have added. And when I'm setting a max document as, let's say, one, I am saying take the first search result from the search that I did. If I made it 10, what it would essentially do is it would take the top 10 documents that it got in the search result, right? And then there is something called as max chunks also. What that essentially means is that if you see over here, this one document, if I open, is actually having multiple chunks of text. That whole document was a very long document, so it was broken down into small, small chunks, right? Now, when I'm searching, if I run a search right over here, actually, we could see that mm, I'll just select something over here. I'll say chunk, max chunk as 10 and query. The query that I'll run is what is SAP HANA, right? And I'll run. If you see in the search result, it found these many chunks. It found 6 chunks, right? And a bunch of metadata along with it, right? If you see, it tells that chunk came from which document, right? Product data, product underscore data dot docx, right? So this is essentially what it is doing. If I had, let's say, kept a max chunk of, let's say, only two, right? And I had run this thing, you could see that it gave me only top two chunks, right? So this is essentially what we are configuring over there. What is the number of chunks that I want my answer to depend on? So cons compare it with a Google search, right? You want to make sure that whenever you search, you only want to get your answers based on the top relevant searches rather than some 100 search result that came, right? To make sure that your answers are grounded on the most recent and the most popular data. That is what we are doing over here. Then we have so this grounding output variable needs to be added in our prompt also. The way we added user resume, we will hmm, we will also add this grounding output variable in the exact same format. And if you see, it will, okay, it should have lost this. The variable must be included in your message for the data retrieved. We passed in the AI, which we already did. Let me save this. I don't know why that's happening, but anyways, uh, I am doing this for the first time myself, so I don't know. Input variable is this. Okay, this is a grounding output variable. My bad. What it says, variable must be included in your message for the data retrieve. Oh, my bad. Sorry. Grounding output variable should be here because whatever results we get from grounding output, that result should come in our prompt as an input because the LLM will take that. So this is how it should be. This is correct. Then the obvious ones, the input translation, auto detect English. So it says the source language, it should auto detect. There are multiple options. I won't go there. Target language again. Input filtering, you could add a bunch of things over here, whatever you want. Whatever you don't want, you don't add them. Let's say we add just height, some threshold, and then model configuration we have already seen. This is output filtering. If you want, you can add something over here. And I don't know what this product protected material code is, but yeah. And then there is this output translation. Actually, I'll remove this output translation and input translation. They are not really adding anything of value, but yeah. So I'll just save this. This is not getting enabled. the reason that it's not getting enabled is because of this error. The variable must be included in your message for the data retrieved by the grounding module to be passed in the AI module. We did add that to the message. Mm, this thing. Uh, for now,
So
I
again,
will.
there is a space there in the prompt, like before the variable name.
Would this matter? It does. Yes. Thanks for that. Yeah. So, rookie mistake, but yeah. Now we have something. So I'll do the. So user resume. I'll just copy something from here like this. In an ideal world, grounding input variable, I can. So if you see the grounding input variable, actually for now we don't have anything, right? So I'll just, if you remember what I had done in this, when I ran this grounding thing, right? The document search thing, I had added a query over here. What is SAP HANA? So for just for showing what it is, right? I'll just add this over here. But in an ideal world, what you would probably want to do in such a scenario is, let's say you have parsed a resume and you found the designation of a person, and you want to first check what should be the uh, relevant experience for a senior data scientist according to some internal repository that you have or some internal documentation that you have, and that internal documentation is created as a repository over here on top of which you want to search. So this output of senior data scientist should become an input to this grounding, but because we have added a repository which doesn't have any of that information, I'm just putting something that it will be able to answer, right? And then I'll just run this. Mhm. Yeah. So actually, that grounding thing didn't really add any value over here because what we were essentially doing is, just extracting the resume. But if I add in the prompt that I want, along with certifications, I want grounding answer, and I want it in a string format, and I clearly mentioned that over here. Response for the add that in the in the define. And then over here, I will clearly mention that this is a very bad user experience for a tool built by SAP, but still, grounding response. So what I have essentially done is I have added the grounding response I will remove it from the user resume and I'll add it outside. One more thing, if you have noticed, is this resume coming in, HTML tags or XML tags, right? This is a very standard way in which prompts are written because it is understood from a lot of research and experimentation that for some reason LLMs understand boundaries when they are defined using HTML or XML tags. So we could actually do the same for this also, where I add this as a and I add that over here. So this I will save and let us see if it works. User resume, I'll again add grounding input variable. I'm hoping that it returns something, but let's see. If you see, it also showed all the steps that it has successfully completed. Huh. If you see for the grounding answer, it has said the grounding response provided contains documentation about SAP HANA, da 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 da, da, whatever. Now, if I do something uh, over here where for the grounding, I say maximum chunks as 2, okay, and I say verbatim text. Whatever is retrieved as a response from the grounding output, add that in the output JSON, define as verbatim text. Do not summarize. What I am saying is जैसा retrieve हुआ वैसा का वैसा दिखाओ करके. So imagine you do a Google search, you get top 5 links or whatever headlines you see, you want the text exactly to come over here, right? So do this, that's it. He runs. Yeah. If you see, if you see grounding answer में, you see that it has just given us some blabber, if not anything else. Now we can actually go to the repository that we had seen, right? That we had added. Where will we get that? I'll just copy this from here and I'll remove this. Why is this so slow? Okay, I'll copy this. I'll go here. I'll do this. Select to what is SAP HANA, the same question, and I'll run this. And if you see, reduce econ in complexity, this is exactly what it gave us over here in the answer, right? Because we asked for it to not summarize or not do anything. Whatever the grounding response that we got, we will just add it verbatim into our output, right? So this is how you usually ground your answers. This is very important in cases where you don't want the LLM to hallucinate, rather generate answers based on some search that you have done on top of your database. It could be a SQL database. It could be a, there is something called as vector databases. I will not delve a lot into that right now, but vector databases are again a big business right now for making sure that you are able to search through your documents in an intelligent way. So, so that your answers are always grounded, or the answers are always relevant to the documentation of your company or some documentation that you have somewhere else or whatever it is, right? So this is essentially how you create like a pipeline. As you can see, this pipeline has all these steps, and it ran through all of them, and it generated a structured output. In a ideal enterprise setup, you would take this output, you would um, you know uh, convert this JSON format into let's say a tabular format. You would do some data entry in some structured database, and you would create dashboards out of it or whatever. That is like a very simple but a very popular use case for data extraction across many places. So yeah, so this is essentially what I wanted to cover today. Um, I'll just take a pause if you guys have any doubts or anything on how. This is a very simple example, but again, as I told last time, this is like an enterprise level thing that even Amazon has something called as Bedrock Agent Core, which essentially does this, but at a very large scale, right? So that is essentially what it does, right? If you see Amazon Bedrock Agent Core, one platform to build, connect, and optimize agents. They started calling it agents, but if you see over there also, they have the same things. Pricing, resources. Okay, they've completely changed their this thing, but yeah, if you see gateway, then there is memory, which is essentially this whole uh, not really this thing, but yeah, they have browser tool. You can browse through the internet. There is code interpreter, which you where you can write a code using an agent and things like that. But this is essentially the same thing. This SAP platform is a very kind of a naive platform, but Amazon has a very, very good platform for building all these agents and these kind of pipelines also, right? So yeah, again, I'll take a pause if anyone has anything on this, or else yeah, this was what I wanted to cover. I'm not sure if this is of any help, but this is a very basic but and very enterprise level use case that many people solve on a day-to-day basis on large organizations. Yeah.
So, regarding this grounding, so the grounding within the like pipeline or the workflow should always be after the input variables, or like after the response we get, or like grounding itself can be used to restrict the data set itself, like at the first place.
Uh, so grounding is essentially done to make sure that your LLM knows the context on top of which it has to answer. Now, unless and until you, so there are two things, right? You can, so if you have like some company documentation which is like 20,000 page long, you can't add that whole document into your prompt, right? You will not be able to do that because none of the model supports that long an input. We saw, if you remember, input context length, right? You have a limit on how many tokens you can give in as an input to an LLM. And you have a limit also to the output, which is the max tokens that we saw. So if your document is a 20,000 page document, you will not be able to give the whole document at once. But then how do you make sure that the LLM is still able to answer correctly? What you'll need to do is you'll need to break this document into smaller parts. Then, whatever the user is asking, let's say the user is asking about some HR policies within your organization, then you need to take the user's query, find the most relevant sections in that 20,000 page document, and add that as context for the LLM, and then give that context to the LLM and also give what the user has asked and ask the LLM to answer the question, but always ground its answer on this context that you have added from the search that you did. So that is essentially why input query is important uh, in this case. But let's say you only had like 20-page document on top of which you want to answer the question, right? In that case, you don't need to do all of this search and everything. You can just convert that 20-page PDF into text, add that as a context within every LLM call that you are making, and it will be able to answer the question. It doesn't need to search, get the top 10 chunks or top 10 documents or whatever. No need to do all of those things. So yeah, depending, in that case, you don't need to use the query for searching. As you saw over here, whatever we were adding, hmm, input variable, whatever we were adding here in what is SAP HANA for grounding input, right? We don't need to do this because the whole grounding document is now part of my context. The reason we are doing this on top of the grounding database, the database that we added over here, was because that database was so big that all of it couldn't have been added over here as the variable. So what we did was we extracted the relevant chunks out of that database and only added those chunks in our prompt so that the LLM is able to answer only on top of those chunks. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Mm.
Similar to this, on considering an organization where there are a lot of recruitment happens and a lot of people, kind of submit their resumes, right? They we probably get some in thousands, and if I want, as a person, wants to filter them based on the skill set and
Mm-hmm.
rank them out of it. I mean, similar
Mm-hmm.
to what the example that you have given just now. So that kind of a query will also work similarly to this.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you see, what you want to do, what usually you would want to do is, uh, it happens a lot in our organization, and I'm sure it happens in larger organizations also, that you get a resume, you want to see what are the most similar resumes, or what are the most similar profiles present within our organization, who can probably interview that person. Let's just take a very simple example, right? I get a resume into my system through some portal, and I want to see who is the most relevant person who can probably interview this person. Right. Now,
Mm.
for that, what I'll need to do is I'll need to take that person's resume and I'll need to extract some specific keywords. And then I need to search those keywords, which will come, these keywords will come over here. I'll need to search those keywords through the repository of resumes that I have, which could be in thousands. Now I will get the top 5 or top 10 resumes based on those keywords that I have put over here, which I have extracted from here, right? And then I'll use those resumes and give those 5 resumes to the LLMs and say, this is the resume of the input candidate that I got. Out of these 5 resumes, tell me which is the most relevant resume to interview this candidate, and judge rate it on a on the basis of, let's say, their experience, or on the basis of their relevant experience, or the basis of the institute from there where they did their whatever education. So the LLM will do the intelligent job of rating it and giving you the one resume of the person who should interview this candidate. But the search will make sure that you get the topmost, you are able to filter all the noise and get the topmost things which should be given to the LLM to do the intelligent talk. That is what this system is usually built for. These systems are usually called as retrieval augmented generation systems, RAG systems. What, so first you're retrieving from a database. So this, whatever we had over here, this is a database that we have added, right? This is basically a database. First, you are retrieving the best chunks or best documents out of the database. Then you are augmenting the generation LLM with that database and then generating the answer. That's the reason it's called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG systems. Cool.
Basically maps with what is the input, I mean, according to what people are requesting, and then the skill set
Hmm.
within your organization.
Hmm.
So they'll map it accordingly, and then they'll rate it based on who can take uh, the interviews, right?
Yeah. So this is a very simple use case that I spoke about. there are hundreds of use cases that HR teams can build on this, hundreds of use cases that procurement teams in companies. I'm sure like Weber works in SAP, right? So I'm not sure if he does any procurement related work, but invoice procurements and invoicing and all of this is like a very big problem in large organizations. And invoices usually are present in PDF formats. So what you need to do is you need to take let's say you are in a large organization, you have a what we call you have signed a contract with some company. There is an SOW, there is a MSA or whatever. Within an SOW you have the details of the payment terms. Now you need to extract those payment terms, then every time the client makes a payment or the vendor makes a payment, you get an invoice. So what you need to make sure is that the payment terms defined in the SOW, are they matching with the payment that the client or the vendor or whoever is actually making, right? And are they in sync with each other? So what all of this does is this essentially makes your unstructured data needs to be first converted into structured data, and then you need to do the intelligence on top of it. And that is where all of this becomes very important. Whatever these kinds of pipelines where you extract from PDFs, convert that into structured data, and then use that in the downstream tasks. The intelligence comes from LLMs, like extracting data from unstructured and converting it into a structured format so that you can run rules and queries on top of. Yeah, cool. We have almost spent 15, 20, I think an hour. Yeah, cool. Anything else that you'd want to discuss?
No, Shivam.
Yeah, cool. Thanks a lot. Bye.